Looks like I'm recording. Hello. I am getting ready to go on a next trip. Um, my last trip was great, but it was pretty intense. I had 15 flights in 2.5 months. So a lot of border crossings and immigration and customs and currency and all that sort of thing. And I wanted to see some places before they changed too much, which I was successful at doing. And yet some of those places have changed so much that I probably wouldn't go back, or I would at least go to a different part of them. Laos was completely different. Northern Thailand, I heard more English speaking than I heard any place else on my trip. And yet inside of that, there were just little pockets of places that were amazing and awesome. I love Padang. I love being at Ricky's Bungalows. I love being in Bukittinggi and just being in a really peaceful, quiet, more of a natural kind of place. So I started thinking about what I would like to do next for another adventure, simultaneously with being out of the country during this electoral process and all the bombardment of advertising commercials and what have you. That wasn't my primary motive, but it doesn't hurt. So the way this works for me is I start contemplating, what feels right for me, what kind of feeling would I like to have through my next trip. And immediately the thing that rose to the surface was the idea of getting back to Central America. Um, I've been through Guatemala multiple times. I haven't been to the southwest part of Guatemala in 20 plus years. It's changing a lot. And so I just started reading. And this is the way this process unfolds for me is I just dive in and I start just throwing shit up in the air and looking at lots of different things. I look at blogs and podcasts and that sort of thing. A lot of them to me are inane and mundane and everybody's saying the same thing. But within that, you find little nuggets, little pockets of nuggets. So one of the things I do before I take a trip is get clear on what is my intention, what's the purpose that I really am taking this trip for, what's the experience that I want to have. And so after traveling so much last time, I wanted a slow, gentle, easy experience, taking time to relax and hang out in places that I loved. And I also wanted to target culture, unique foods, and nature. So what happened was I started out by looking at Guatemala. Actually, I thought about flying into Mexico City and then taking the bus down to Chiapas, which I love, and then crossing the border and going down into northern Guatemala. Long trip, lots of traveling, and I didn't want to do a lot of traveling. So then I started looking at flights into Guatemala. I looked at flights to Managua, Nicaragua. I looked at flights for San Jose, Costa Rica, and it was complicated. And one of the complications is Managua is served by like 5 airlines. So one of the things I learned was a lot of people from Nicaragua go all the way down to San Jose, Costa Rica, because the flights are better. So the flights kept fluctuating and fluctuating, and I wasn't sure on how much time I wanted to travel. And so what evolved was a couple of things. I really got clear that I wanted to go back to this part of Guatemala I haven't seen in ages for two reasons. The part toward the eastern part of the country is more remote and peaceful and quiet and natural. So I'll be on the Rio Dulce National like Park Reserve. I'm going back to the organic farm outside of Poptune, and I'll be staying in a tree house again. And then I wanted to get into Copan, Honduras. I wanted to do that for 25 years, but it used to be so impossible and complicated and dangerous. And now Copan, Honduras is considered one of the safest parts of Honduras. So by looking at possibilities, all of a sudden things just kind of fell away and vanished. Other things like rose to the surface and started, getting clear. So one of the complications I had was I don't not a really huge fan of Guatemala City. I took the overnight bus there once before, and we got off at the bus station at 5 or 5:30 in the morning. And the other bus station that goes maybe an hour, hour and a half to Antigua is only 2 blocks away. And the advice we got was do not leave the bus station, do not walk, and it's not safe. And I'm thinking to myself, how can it not be safe to go 2 blocks? But then everybody said that, even at the bus station. So there weren't any staff there. We wound up getting out of there and going over to Antigua, which is perfect. So this time, I'm trying to figure out things I've never done before, like transportation, chicken buses, luxury buses, shuttles. How do I get there? And I love doing that research. And if I get stuck, I just keep digging until I find some way around it. So what I found was there are a couple of shuttles that go, primarily they go from Antigua, Guatemala, but I found a couple that would pick me up in Guatemala City, but they pick up at like 4 o'clock in the morning. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. I have an app for Uber, and sometimes they have local pickups. I is one of those in Guatemala, and then taxi service. And at that time in the morning, I have to be there by a quarter to four. And Uber, I started reading, was notorious for maybe showing up, maybe not. And the taxis were the same way. And I looked for budget hotels that were close to the shuttle pickup, and still would have to walk 3, 4, 5, 6 blocks in dodgy neighborhoods at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, which is like not going to happen. So I wrote to the hotel I found near the airport. The uh, the little hotel has um, a free pickup. So when I get in, they're going to pick me up at the airport. So I sent them my flight information, and I gave them, the flights and the description and my photographs so they know what I look like. And then I said, by the way, I need to go to this pickup in the morning. Is it possible to do that? Because my backup plan was to wait till 9:30 in the morning and find some way to get to the bus station and get on a bus and then take all day to get there and probably have to change 2 or 3 times. So the people from the hotel wrote back to me and they gave me crystal clear instructions on where to go through the airport. Go to the exit with the blue light, and you'll be in front of cafe, whatever it is. And in front of that cafe is a door. You walk through that door, and we'll be standing there with a sign that has your name on it. Excellent. And we will have a taxi for you in the morning. I'm like, and at that moment, everything kind of fell into place. So I will make another recording at some point about what I'm going to be doing after that. But so what's happening is I'm leaving Guatemala City the next morning, and I'm going to be in Copan, Honduras by noon. And it's such a peaceful small town. I mean, there's hot springs, coffee farms. I'm going to do probably a horse tour in the mountains. It's a refuge and rehabilitation center for the scarlet macaws, and just a whole number of other things. But it's a small town. So once I get through, after having months of planning for travel, I've decided to spend like 6 days there. And so I'm just going to get in there, relax, go out and see the ruins, head out to the hot springs, have some local food, and then the local people will help me figure out how to cross the border, get a bus, and then go north toward a village called Poptune. And Poptune is where the organic farm is I stayed in probably 25, 30 years ago. And I'm going to be staying, they call them a tree house. It's an elevated house on the second level. It's on stilts, but you get up off the ground and it's much cooler in the forest. And then I'm heading back to a place called Hotelito Perdido, which is the little lost hotel, literally. And it's an hour, hour and a half boat ride down the Rio Dulce River to a little place that has no electricity, no Wi-Fi. It's only solar power, organic garden. They bring kayaks. They're near waterfalls. I'll go paddling in the mangroves. I've got a hammock on my balcony. And if I paddle the other direction to go across the river, there's hot springs over there. So those three places, just being immersed in peace and quiet of nature, are the intent for how I want to start this trip. And then after that, I'll be in Antigua, which is a historic town. I'll be at a couple of the villages around Lake Atitlan, and then eventually I'll head from there down south to El Salvador. Um, Generally, when I've been down there, El Salvador has still been considered like the murder capital of the world, and they have a new president in the last, I guess, 4 years, 4 or 5 years. And so now it's considered one of the safest countries in El Salvador. And when I know people who are from there, when they talk about their country now, there's just this big, huge smile on their face for how lovely it is to be there, which is the experience I hope people in Venezuela are able to have again one day. So I found a couple places down there. One's called Ruta de las Flores, and it's named that because of the flowers blooming along the wildflowers blooming along the highway. And there's a national park there called basically Parque Imposible, the Impossible Park. And then I'll go to the city, San Salvador, And eventually I'll wander all the way down into Nicaragua. Nicaragua has the second largest bioreserve in the Americas, second only to the Amazon. And I'm not being able to find any information about how to get in there, so it's not a major tourist hub. But then there are lots of other options for nature, peace and quiet, going down the Rio San Juan, Indio Maíz Nature Preserve area, and then getting to the Caribbean coast of Nicaragua. So what's happened is I went from not knowing what to do to figuring out the details and making notes and talking to people, writing to people, and getting specific kind of concrete, reliable pieces of information. So I've often told people if you want to travel like this and have an adventure, the first thing you have to do is begin. And until you begin, you have no experience. So then you're kind of wrestling with the same hallucinations, I call them. It's like, oh my God, is it safe down there? I remember the first time I went to Mexico, my friend's grandmother said, Mexico? You can't go to Mexico. They eat babies in Mexico. So the only way to have your own experience is to start. And so one of the recommendations I've made for people, there's a direct flight from Denver to Cancun. And I did that several years ago. I think I spent 3 weeks down in Cancun or in Mexico, in the Yucatan, for $500, including flight. So I got on a plane, went to Cancun. ADO bus station is at the airport. I bought a ticket, take me to town, go to the big bus station, and then I head west to the village of Valladolid. And I walk out of the bus station, and I'm immediately immersed in a Mexican culture, traffic, people on the sidewalk selling things and fruit and smells and fragrances and cobblestone streets. And then I walk to a hostel, so you can stay in a Airbnb or a really nice hotel or a hostel. And the cenotes and the food and the the events down there that you can go out and play with. Um, so now what I know is if somebody wants to go to Copan and just go for a short trip, fly into Guatemala City, get on a shuttle, go to Copan, I've learned enough now that if somebody wanted to do that, I can tell you exactly how it might work for you and what the shuttle companies are and so forth. So what I've done, I like learning, and so I like having experiences. And so when I know I want to go someplace, I'll just figure it out. And if it meant that I was going to go to the airport, get on a transit, go down closer to the bus station, spend the night, get up the next morning, and make 2 or 3 stops and get there, well, I would do that. But what I found is a shuttle service that picks me up. I get picked up in Guatemala City, and eventually I'm dropped off at the Central Plaza in Copan, a block and a half from the place that I'm staying. And the place that I'm staying is a private room with a private bath and a full breakfast included for $15 a night. So that's my intro. So this time I got a flight down, 2 flights back. That's it. And when I go through customs and immigration to get into Guatemala, they have a it's kind of, I think it's called like a CP4 or something. And it's basically a visa that once you get there, it gives you 90 days in all these countries. So it makes going across the border, going in and coming out a whole lot easier. So there's an overview. So I'm going to play with this. My normal ScreenFlow program is not working at all. So I'm going to play with this and put some photos in here from past trips and, add a few words about what the experience is. But I am just completely thrilled about going into peaceful, quiet local villages. I wrote to Finca Ixobel in Paptun, and I said, so I've got this question. I stayed there years ago, and then right back immediately, it's like, oh yes, you mean our treehouse, Linda? That's what we call her. That's the original one I stayed in. And so I asked them some questions, and they write back, and it's like, it's our pleasure to serve you. If you have any questions, please let us know. And then Hotelito Perdido, the same thing. They have a welcoming email. They tell you about their place and their facilities and how to get there. And if you want a private boat, that's arrangeable. And if you want to be here for the group dinner in the evening, let us know. So think of Ixabel. We have group dinners in the nighttime, evening. And then at Hotelito Perdido, it's the same thing. All the guests there get together and have dinner at night. And I looked on their website and they have a Riverview bungalow. I think that one's much more pricey. I think that one's $23 a night for a 2-floor bungalow with a hammock on the balcony. So that's coming up shortly. So there's my overview. I'll play with this and post it. So God bless y'all. Hope you're having a great life and enjoying yourself. Ciao.